Good afternoon, Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com, here with your Hurricane Pro and HD video blog for Monday, August 29th, 2016. There is a lot happening out here. First stop, the Pacific Ocean, where we have a pair of hurricanes out here. One of them, Madeline, headed towards Hawaii, hopefully going to dip to the south and miss. And then we have Hurricane Lester over to the east. Both of these moving generally westward towards the Hawaiian Islands. This is the forecast track for Madeline. And remember, the forecast is for the center of the hurricane, the eye. And so if we go back at this map here, look how large this system is overall. And there's the eye. So the forecast is for this part of the storm right here, that part of the hurricane, not the whole thing. So, you move this whole mass of weather in this direction and then dip it south, yeah, the Hawaiian Islands are going to have some impact from this. Presumably it'll weaken a little bit before it gets there. We'll have to wait and see about that. But if you are in Hawaii planning a trip there, especially the Big Island, expect possible impacts from this in the next several days. The official forecast track from the Central Pacific Hurricane Center has it passing near Hawaii between Wednesday morning and early Thursday morning. And the north and southeast facing beaches here, those could be the most impacted by this. Very heavy rain and squalls, high waves coming in, you name it. This could be a pretty big deal, even though the center is forecast to stay south of the Big Island there. The impacts could extend and should extend well away from there. Now, moving on, let's go to the Atlantic Basin, get back to the wide map here. This is an animated shot of what's happening in the Atlantic Basin as of early this afternoon. And we can see there's Tropical Depression number 9 trying to make a run at becoming a tropical storm. There's TD number 8 off the North Carolina coast. Very little impact with this overall. This is Hurricane Gaston, and then we have some action coming off the coast of Africa off the screen here. And we have this little disturbance bringing heavy rain and showers to portions of the northwest Gulf and along the Texas and Louisiana coast, but no pure tropical development expected as of this time from those systems. Now here is the forecast map for the depression, formerly known as 99L, off to the west-northwest and then a bend back towards the northeast with the center of circulation. Obviously, the effects are going to extend well beyond that, and depending on how well organized this system is and how strong it gets, that will determine who receives the most impacts from it. I do want to remind you that the part of the coastline in here that this would potentially go into is very susceptible to storm surge flooding, and that onshore flow, combined with the fact that the system, the would-be storm, would be moving towards that same coast, presents the possibility for a few feet of above-ground inundation. We will know more about that in the next day or so, assuming this gets named and the Hurricane Center will generate their storm surge products, and I'll talk about those here. Now, the water temperatures, the upper ocean heat content, very high where it's located now, a little bit lower up here in the northeast Gulf, but certainly enough energy in that region to provide a lot of intensification if the upper level winds would allow. The vorticity signature for Tropical Depression 9, nice and round, very healthy looking overall. Same is true for TD8 and Gaston and our system here trying to fester around Texas. This really shouldn't develop, but it can bring a lot of heavy rain, like I mentioned, to parts of the Gulf Coast on the northwest part of the Gulf of Mexico. And then we see energy trying to come off the coast of Africa well off to the east. We have many days to watch and wait and see what happens with that. Now, the upper level winds with our tropical depression here, this is the western part of Cuba, and the depression is located right in here. So let me use the yellow coloring and look at how the winds are coming around this area of high pressure, which is right here, clockwise flow, and it's still blowing over the top of the system. Now, the same is true for Gaston over here with an anticyclone to its west, but these upper level winds are lighter by several knots, and that matters. The strength of those upper level winds matters, where here we have a little bit stronger wind flow, in some cases between 20 and 25 knots, and that's enough shear in the atmosphere relative to the storm's movement. Remember, shear is the change in wind direction or speed the higher up in the atmosphere you go. And right now everything's not aligned to allow this to develop very quickly. Nevertheless, the computer model is indicating generally a track towards the Big Bend area of Florida overall, and then out into the Atlantic, where this will probably become a hurricane at some point off the North Carolina coast. We have to wait and see if it tries to sort of come out and then bend up the coast a little bit as high pressure builds over the Atlantic. This is not October or late September where you have these big fronts coming down and they sweep themselves on out to sea along with anything with it. So just something to keep an eye on. This might not necessarily just go on out into the Atlantic, but we'll wait and see about that in the coming days. GFS here, the 850 millibar vorticity map, valid tomorrow morning. Fairly healthy overall, kind of oval shaped. I like to use this map to tell me the strength and the health of the system down at the surface almost, at the 5,000 foot level. If this looks organized, then you start looking at the rest of the layers of the atmosphere. That's how I do it. That's not necessarily how meteorologists, I'm a geographer, that's what my degree is in. I'm interested in the impacts, but I know enough about meteorology to understand these maps enough to discuss them. And what I've learned over the years is looking at the 850 vorticity chart shows me the health of the system. You start from there, and if that looks good, then you go from there. So this is valid Tuesday morning. There's Wednesday morning, Thursday morning. It starts to become a little bit better organized up here. But by now, there's some energy coming in the atmosphere through here that may be giving this a little bit of an assist, what we call baroclinic forcing. But it is starting to look a little bit more intense at this point. And I say more intense. Probably a tropical storm at this juncture, moving across the northern Florida peninsula. And you have to really understand that this will bring the swath of heavy rain, possibly severe weather, storm surge flooding along the coast. Now, this will be a medium impact event, and for some people, probably a high impact event. It doesn't take a hurricane to wreck your life. I mean, people know that, especially here in Louisiana with the flooding that took place from that semi-quasi-tropical low thing that moved through a couple of weeks ago. All right, so don't take this lightly and say, well, it's not a hurricane, so who cares? It will have problems with it, I guarantee you, associated with it for sure. All right, 120 hours out, kind of close to the North Carolina coast there, and we'll have to see if high pressure builds in enough over the Atlantic to block this from going out and send it more up the coast. That's a possibility, something to watch for. Just wanting to give you a little heads up on that. Meanwhile, out in the eastern Atlantic, what will eventually be, presumably, Invest Area 92L, probably going to move off and head west for a good bit. But there's a lot of dry air coming with it. The Saharan air layer kind of accompanying this system, and that might keep it in check for a bit. And I suspect it won't get going until over here. I could be wrong, but this area of the Atlantic just seems to be funky right now, to put an adjective to it. And I think that if it's going to develop, it'll develop over here instead of out in this part of the ocean. So we'll see. Maybe I'm off base on that, but when I see that much dry Saharan air coming with it, especially that, I mean, this is going to struggle for a bit with stable air surrounding it. And this is what it looks like on the wider shot at day 5. There's our tropical system TD9, or whatever it is by this time, off the North Carolina coast there. And this is the system coming off of Africa now. This is 5 days out. It's out over the Atlantic, south of a nice stout area of high pressure, moving generally westward towards the Caribbean Sea, maybe more like the Northeast Caribbean, if at all. It'll certainly bear watching, but I think it's going to be delayed in its development. Maybe not. Gaston got going pretty far to the east, so maybe this will too. We can worry about that one later. There's plenty of other stuff going on for sure. Alrighty, well, that's it from me for today. Have a great rest of your Monday afternoon. I am Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com. That's my website. If you haven't checked it out, now's a good time to do so. Lots of good information there. And of course, you've got some powerful tools and advantages using Hurricane Pro in HD. And I'm always glad to contribute these video discussions to that. That being said, I'll talk to you again about everything tomorrow.